Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Rules of Engagement Developing Fundamentals. We're in segment 3 out of 4 for this episode. It's going to be about build order concepts. Let's get right into a game. On our previous episode of Developing Fundamentals, we actually talked about build order concepts as applies to a timing build. Now we're going to talk about and also actually define the difference between going for a timing build and going for a unit composition builds. Every single build can fall under one of those two categories. You're going for a late game composition, or you're going for a certain timing attack. If it doesn't fall under one of those two categories, it's basically not a well thought out build. It will inevitably fall under one of those two categories. So now we're going to talk about how to go for a composition based build. We're going to look at this through Sue's perspective. He's a Zerg versus Protoss. The composition, first you have to pick the unit composition. That's the first step to do this type of build. The unit composition that he chooses is going to be Broodlord Infestor. That doesn't mean you have to choose that same composition. He says, I want Broodlord Infestor for my composition, right? For you, you might say, I want to go Mass Roaches. Okay, so first you have to pick that idle composition. Then you have to think, what potential weaknesses does this composition have? We're going to actually pause it right here for a second. Let's say if your idle composition was Mass Roaches, right? The potential weakness to that is, one, your opponent builds Sentries and Immortals, and then your composition is bad, right? So if you find that your composition is hard countered by a different composition, that means it's not a composition build, it should be a timing build, because the goal then is to kill them before they get that composition. So you're like, I'm going to Mass Roaches, I'm going to kill them before they can get a lot of Immortals and Sentries, right? So it shouldn't be a composition build, it should be timing build. So if it has a certain weakness to a certain composition that can come out relatively easily from your opponent's side, it should be a timing build. The next weakness is, let's say he's going for Broodlord Infestor. Well, all of a sudden, how does he get there, right? There's potential timing attacks that could happen. So we're going to jump back into the game, and we're going to see that there's a couple possibilities. One, we can see Daisy's coming at him right now with Zealots and War Prisms, some gateway units, right? Early gateway pressure. And we're going to look at this thing. He's building Roaches, right? We just said he's going for Broodlord Infestor. So what's he doing building Roaches? Well, it's to cover the potential timing attack that he has. So he writes down a piece of paper, he does this build. What potential timings can it throw at me, right? One is early gateway units. So I've got to get this Roach Warren down to make sure that I don't die if they just send early gateway units to me. And then, of course, with these Roaches, he can hold this off without a problem. We're just going to fast forward through this just a little bit. Zealot's fighting, doing some damage, but of course, he gets the Roaches out in time. Loses a good number of drones here. That probably was a mistake to battle those drones. Better off to let the hatchery take some damage, because he has enough Roaches in production coming out from the top here that there really wasn't any threat of him dying there, because he took that threat into account, right? The next threat could be a 2-base timing. So he's going to make sure that he continues to build enough units to be safe from a 2-base timing. Just a lot of Roaches and Zerglings, because of course Immortal Sentry is a very popular timing. Pairing this threat, right? And then all of a sudden he sees, okay, Daisy is actually not going to go for 2-base timing. He's going to build a 3rd base, right? He figures that out right about now. So okay, he's building a 3rd base. I don't need to worry about 2-base timing anymore. So I'm free to build the Spire and get my Infestors. Of course, he would get his Infestors anyway, even against 2-base time. But he's free to build the Spire, and then fairly soon he's going to start taking the Hive, right? So he's like, okay, don't even worry about that timing. I can go for my composition now. He's going to start that Hive tech. Now, what's the next potential threat that could come? It could be a 3-base timing right before he gets his composition. So we're going to fast forward up to that segment. And look what he's doing. He's already building Mass Spine Cores, knowing that his Hive, once his Hive finishes, he's going to start that Greater Spire. Wherever the Spire is. Here it is. He's going to start that Greater Spire, but then it still is going to take another 100 seconds to get that up, and 100 seconds plus another 23 seconds on that Hive. That means he has a good amount of time, about 2 minutes, before he can even get those Broodlords out on the field. So he has to be ready to defend a timing before that, and that's why he's building all these Spine Cores. He's going to just posture around the middle of the map to get a little more map awareness, see what's going on. This is not the important part. The important part is talking about the build and the fact that he's acknowledging different threats. And that's why he's building these Spine Cores. He's acknowledging the fact that his opponent could kill him before he gets Broodlords out, so he wants to make sure that he's parried that threat. Then he's going to go for that late game composition. He's going to back away, and the composition is almost up, right? Now this is the last threat right here. Is Daisy in this game actually does go for the 3-base timing. And of course here it comes in, but with the help of these Spine Cores, maybe Sue loses this, maybe it doesn't. That's not the important part of the game. The important part we're going to talk about is basically the fact of how he came up with the build. right? This is the part on build order concepts. So if we can go through those 3 main points again, it's first is going to be you have to figure out what's your ideal composition, right? He picked Broodlord Infestor. You could pick, if you're Protoss, you could pick Carrier, Colossi Stalker. You're like, okay, Colossi are good against ground, Stalkers are good against air. Colossi Stalker, or Colossi Phoenix, whatever composition you want to come up with, right? Then you have to think, okay, what are potential weaknesses? Let's say your composition was Colossi Phoenix. Colossi deal with the ground, Phoenix deal with the air. And then you're saying, wait a minute, what if he builds a lot of Corruptors? Because Corruptors beat both those units. If it's countered so simply, it's not a good composition. So, or if it's countered simply, but they're early game units, you can use it in a timing build. Colossi Phoenix is probably just not a good composition. So maybe go to a different one, right? When you come to a composition that you don't think is easily countered by a simple composition from your opponent, that means it's a good late game composition. So now all of a sudden you can use it, and now all you have to worry about is, of course, your execution of the build, but as far as coming up with the build, it's going to be potential threats. So he wrote down his list, gateway units. Okay, even though I don't want to get roaches because they're not part of my late game plans, we're going to have to get a few anyway to deal with gateway timings. Or at least get the roach warren so we can make them in reaction if my opponent is doing gateway timing. Then, okay, maybe a 3 base timing you hit me with. Okay, I need to get a lot of spine cores. So it's that type of thought process that's important. And that's hopefully something you guys can take back at home. Go through your little builds, and every game you play should have a plan like that laid out beforehand. A rough plan. Doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be, I want to get these units. These are potential threats. If I see these threats, this is how I'll respond to them. So that's going to be it for the Build Order Concepts Part 2 segment. We're going to take a quick break, then we're going to be back with the question and answer section of this show.